Hello and welcome to the Tilehurst End podcast, episode 402. I think it's two. Last time out was a little confusing, but good to be back. Obviously, this is Ross that you're hearing right now. Ben is not with us today. The kind of sickness that was taking him down over the Christmas period. Turns out that was a throat infection. So I've put him on bed rest. For this week, but not to worry. I have two excellent guests with me today. And we're going to talk mostly about the off-pitch situation. Obviously, it's been a little while since we've done that here on the pod, but we do have representatives from Sell Before We Die and Star today. So Adam Jones, TTE alum as well. Good to have you back.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. You were saying in the last episode that I haven't been on in a while, so I thought I'd make a little return, and yeah, very happy to be on.
Definitely, yeah. And just remind the listeners your affiliation with Star and Sell Before We Die.
So I'm jack of all trades, master of none at Sell Before We Die. I'm just like get stuck in wherever. And on Star, sorry, I'm the football governance guy, basically, who covers the governance bill.
Awesome, awesome. Unfortunately, something that is important for Reading fans in this day and age. We've also got Greg Double here from Sell Before We Die. How you doing today, Greg?
Good evening, Ross. Yeah, very well, thank you, mate. Yeah, happy to be on. Happy to be joined by Adam. Yeah, gutted Ben isn't here because I thought we could have had a 45-minute love-in about Charlie Savage, but other than that, it's
Yeah, that's what I normally have to cut out of the podcast is the 45-minute loving. You guys get the
nice,
3-minute
nice.
loving
Yeah.
on the actual pod. Greg, is this your first time on the
It is.
Tilehurst
I'm
End
losing
pod?
my TTE wings. It's yeah, it's nice to be on. Avid listener, I will add. But yeah, no, it's just a shame we're talking all off the pitch because again, I think something you've spotted is I wanted to talk at length about Charlie Savage covering Kanu with left flank coverage, but instead we'll talk about a club not being sold. And
Indeed, indeed, yeah. Unfortunately, it's the off-field stuff today, but a warm welcome. Anyway, just before we get started, do you want to just give us a little rundown of what you do at Sell Before We Die, Greg?
Yeah, so I'm one of the founding members of Sell Before We Die. I'm typically in charge of like the comm side of it, which basically reflects what I do for a living. Like I'm a creative director at a PR company, which basically means I come up with stunts and campaigns to get attention, and so doing them for my football club's been quite fun. And then I joined Star because I thought Rob Coig was about to buy the club and Sell Before We Die was going to ride off into the sunset, and then he didn't buy the club, and now I'm sort of straddling both. But again, same with Star, trying to prove their comms, and look, my favourite line is trying to represent Stone Island as River Island on the starboard. So it's yeah, trying to drag 'em kicking and screaming into the 21st century with lots of willing people who want to do that.
Nice, nice. All right, all right. Well, looking forward to talking to you both. Listeners, we're not going to do a Charlton review today or a preview. I think the team, graced us with a 0-0 when we want to discuss off-field matters. So we are going to leave that out. Might drop some analysis later this week, but yeah, we're going to talk mostly off-pitch issues today. Before we get started, big thank you as always to our friends at ZCZ Films for just putting a little bit into the jar for us every year, helping us keep this thing going. They are the guys that allow us to access sort of the game replays and things like that really help the analysis come along. So thank you to ZCZ Films. All right, let's get into it. All right, welcome back to the Tilehurst End podcast, episode 402. So it is an off-pitch special today. Obviously, the club has not yet been sold. Dai Young still owns Reading Football Club, unfortunately. So my first question, just to kick us off here, really is, Greg, when you started Sell Before We Die, did you envision it needing to be in it this long?
Simple answer is no.
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's no, I didn't. I think 'cause, like, look, the way we were set up, I think I've said this to a few people. It's like, frankly, I hate being part of a protest group. I was sort of skeptical when we started that we'd be able to do anything or thing. So, I personally, my terms and conditions for even being involved was like, look, can we at least make sure we don't just shout and scream and make a fuss, that we actually try and get the club sold and help to get get that way, because when we first joined, like Dai Young hadn't even announced that he was going to sell the club or was thinking about selling the club. So that was our first point, and then our second point was going to be about showing off how brilliant Reading Football Club is and how it should be bought, and trying to make it and a lot of our early stuff was all about not necessarily talking about Dai Young, but about talking to potential owners to come and get us, basically.
Mm.
And then as more and more stuff came out about how complicated the club was to sell, and the stuff involving Rob Coig and the training ground and the points deductions and the staff not getting paid, and all of a sudden it sort of transformed itself from being a sort of quite a single issue movement to suddenly being like, oh, now we're in the House of Commons, now we're in the House of Lords talking about the future of football. So yeah, suffice to say, I wasn't expecting it to last this long. It was like COVID. I went to stay with my in-laws for a couple of weeks, thinking it would blow all over, and ended up staying with them for 6 months.
Right.
I sort of feel like that. Only my love for Reading is slightly more than my in-laws, but it was, yeah. I think that's a fair assumption. The optimist in me says we're in the last stretch, but I've said that 3 or 4 times, particularly this time last year, and then we ran on the pitch. So.
Yeah. No, it's definitely gone longer than I think any of us could have envisioned. Obviously, over a year now since Dai Young even announced that he would sell the club. But like you guys said before, that happened. Sell Before We Die was formed. Adam, when did you get involved with Sell Before We Die in that process?
So, like Greg, I was there from the very start. We obviously had the Tilehurst End, Elm Park Royals Club 1871 Star and Crab Royals involved. I came in with Sim because I was quite keen to be involved in this because I've been quite anti Dayong for quite some time. So yeah, I've been there for the entirety of it, and it's lasted for more than 18 months now. So yeah, I didn't expect, as Greg said, I didn't expect us to be here this long. I didn't expect to do what we are doing. I mean, being in a meeting with Steph Peacock in December, the sports minister, being in a meeting with Dayong Pang last December, it's just yeah, absolutely mad, really.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll pitch this to either of you that want to kind of take this. We have now, it's a new year, it's 2025. Give us a sense of what 2024 looked like for Sell Before We Die, because obviously it did feel like it was building towards its conclusion with the Coheg sale. But unfortunately, that obviously hasn't ended up going through, and I'm sure it's been kind of tricky for you guys to reform and regroup after that. So. Yeah, kind of
So,
tell us what 2024 has been like for Sell
so
Before We Die.
I'll kick us off and I'll pass us off to Adam because I know he's very good on timeline, which I always get a bit hazy of because loads of it happened at the same time. But I'll roughly divide last year into 3 parts, which was basically, oh no, we're in big trouble. Oh no, the training ground's going to go. Oh yay, we're saved. Oh no, we're in trouble again. Um, I think that the start of the year was obviously it's around this time last year that I think the Port Vale pitch invasion happened, which came as a result of Dayong Pang literally lying to the face of Star and Sell Before We Die members in this meeting. I wasn't actually in that meeting because they did it in the middle of the day in Reading. But the basic premise was we don't need to sell any players in January. So you can relax about that. Please stop any planned action. We're like, okay, that's fair enough. And then we got a tip off from someone in the club that there had already been a bid accepted for Tom McIntyre and Tom Holmes. And I think that's the anger that led to Port Vale, which I think represented the pinnacle of anger and rage and awareness. And like, look, from a campaign point of view, it was great because we were on the front page, back pages of almost every paper on that weekend, and it really. One thing I don't think we're short of is an awareness issue, and then it all seemed to sort of like start accelerating quite quickly towards like the EFL suddenly became a lot more interested, and we're actually quite compassionate after that period because they were like, look, we're not going to give you a points deduction because we understand the rage and where it's come from, and we're actually, in my view, we're quite fair, even-handed on that. But it was a suspended points deduction, i.e., if we did it again, you're getting a points deduction. Then it folded into we need to sell the training ground, and that was that time was particularly difficult for me personally because I was just about to start a new job, and had said to the gang literally like before, I need to have a couple of weeks off. My missus is heavily pregnant with our second child, and I'm literally about to start a new job. And then the Bearwood training ground thing happened on day 2 of my new job, and I remember being like, okay, this is going to be a thing. I spoke to my boss straight away, and I said, like, look, I'm sorry about this, but I might need to be on Sky Sports News and various other things, and like, we need to run this. But I look back on that period as that's the occasion that made me think, actually, I'm happy to be a part of this group, because genuinely fan action mattered at that point. And Rob Coig said on that Wickham podcast that the fans made the buying of the training ground too toxic, and so I was out. Which I remember taking great pride in, and one of the guys, well, one of the women, sorry, I should say, is, Sue Symes, did an absolute job on like finding this clause about Woking Borough Council not being able to use Bearwood for anything else. It was just proper Reading nerdery, and it did as an absolute solid and went through that. And then we got into the really weird situation of Rob Coig suddenly going from villain to potential saviour, and that was hard for the group, because I still, my personal view of Rob Coig is not great, but I think he would be an okay owner. But it was quite hard to make that switch from someone who basically said, "Oh, I would have got away with it if it hadn't been for you meddling fans," to then be like, "Yay, Rob Coig,
Yeah,
like
right.
to the
Yeah.
rescue!"
It
Like,
was definitely a big shift in
yeah,
direction, because I was
it
also
was.
quite frustrated. I think that was the most frustrated I was last
That
year,
was
was the training
that was
ground purchase.
that was the most convinced I was that we were getting asset stripped, and in a horrible way. And then, to be fair, since Coe got involved in various exclusivities, we had this period of sort of quite tranquil times, because our view has always been like, look, we're not here to be like, I don't know, like a famous group or a bunch of ultras or anything. As far as I'm concerned, if the club's being sold, we shut up. We don't need to exist. And we had this like quite blissful few months of yay, like everything's going smoothly. I've still got a statement that was written that was basically sell before we buy, and we're off. And very nearly pressed send on it with the game which Coig was at, because I thought like it's so obvious we've been sold, like happy days. And then really glad I didn't press send on that, because that would have been
Yeah.
embarrassing. Yeah, that would have been
That could
really
have been a
embarrassing.
bad one.
That would have
Yeah,
been
yeah.
that would
That
have
might
been
have made our comedy moment of
yeah, that
2024.
that would have been the sell before we die version of that famous Brighton pitch invasion
Yeah,
of
yeah.
yeah, we're up, we're in the playoff, and oh
Right.
shit, they've scored. But no, and then I went to this horrible period, and I almost like call this almost like the conspiracy period, where after the Coig deal fell through, and obviously he'd been funding the club, and obviously like so many things happening a bit like Aziz got sold basically with Rob Coig's blessing, which is, when you look back on it, is bonkers. And now there's all this stuff about the liens, and we're now in a period that has been probably the hardest to understand. And I think it's the point where I think I'll hand over to Adam, but I would say it's the part where we've become a lot more political now, and being about like, look, how can we? Is there any pressure that we can exert on Dai Young to sell? Because it just got too complicated, and we started looking at the Chinese embassy route and the Chinese politician route, and that's proven to be quite fruitful. But I'd say, having gone full circle, I'm now feeling more positive, because the High Tong Bank issue was a real issue. The bit that I'm slightly confused at is that Rob Coig thinks he found a route around it before the latest club statement said that it's been sorted. But it's sorted, and that was a real problem, because, in layman's terms, it's basically Dai Yong owns Hai Tong a lot of money. Sorry, this does accidentally rhyme, but it's going to go. Dai Yong owes Hai Tong a load of money. Hai Tong basically saying, well, you can't sell the club until you've paid us off, and you can't put any money into the club until you've paid us off, because any money that goes into the club should be going into us. And so clearly some sort of deal's been reached if the club are comfortable to say that publicly, and now yeah, again, we're not short of buyers. Like, there's been loads of offers. Like, look, the Taylor one is the latest one to come back in. Rob Coig is still in and about. Obviously, Roger Smee had a look as well. It's so you're now into the period of will Dai Young sell, and personally, I'm of the opinion he will. He's just going to drag it out for as long as possible for the most amount of money. But I am sympathetic to those who think that he won't sell. Up until I still can't think of a reason why you wouldn't sell. And if you're offered, if you've got a choice between 0 million and 30 million, you take 30 million. Like, I don't see it. I don't. I am yet to see an argument that is, well, why wouldn't he? Why? What's the benefit of him not selling? But yeah, Adam. Sorry, I realise I've rambled big time
No,
there.
that
But
was a good rundown of the year.
did
Actually, that was
yeah.
a good rundown of the year. And yeah, no, Adam, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it was a very good rundown. Obviously, as Greg said, we had the pitch invasion last January, which brought us God knows how many media requests. It was absolutely ridiculous. We had so many people doing so many different media requests. And the thing was with the pitch invasion, we hit the sweet spot with that because I don't think there was many Premier League or Championship games that weekend for some or no reason. So it was that was obviously a real positive for us that we got so much coverage. And I think, as Greg said, we're not here to just make a racket or anything like that for no reason. So I don't think we were complacent with the exclusivity period, but we just had to back off, I think, a little bit. And then obviously with it all falling through, we've had to kind of start up again a little bit. And obviously our most recent actions were the advertising ban last month. That we wanted to do something ahead of the January transfer window. We thought that was important to kind of get back on the horse and do something, and then obviously we had the in-person forum at Blue Collar, which me and Greg were on the panel along with Sam from Club 1871 and Ian, who's one of our comms/PR guys. So yeah, it's been a pretty busy period for us in recent weeks. In terms of kind of what we're doing now, I think a lot of it is kind of political stuff. I've got a call with Yuan Yang on, I think it's Sunday. So we'll get an update on what's happened regarding whether we've got a response from the Chinese embassy or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, and then we'll have to consider next steps depending on whether she's got a response or not. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think our campaign's been split into two ways now in terms of things that we think might actually make a difference for us, maybe potentially embassy and the political side of it, legal side of it. And then we've got the media coverage, which is protests, fan actions, stunts, and stuff like that. I mean, we've done so much on fan action and stunts, and we've got plenty of media coverage, but it's about keeping our story in the limelight. And that's obviously not an easy task because we're a League One club that is kind of, it's not in like liquidation danger at the moment, but you just never know what's around the corner. So we're always trying to keep ourselves in the spotlight, but it's
There were
tough.
definitely times last year where I felt like the club stayed in the spotlight partially because of how well Sellers was doing, and everyone wanted to talk about that. So it was like, okay, but let's consider that this club can't go anywhere with this manager until the crucial thing has been done. There's a few things that you said there that were really interesting. I do want to touch on the January transfer window because obviously that's very pertinent to now. But before I get there, you guys have both kind of used the term political a few times, which I think is really interesting. And I think at times in 2024, for good reasons, like kind of like you said, Adam, where sometimes you just need to get out of the way a little bit. The club has, Sell Before We Die has been quieter on social media. Kind of what is the organization doing in the meantime, and kind of like what things behind the scenes happen that maybe don't get communicated as much, kind of like those political things you're talking about.
I think there's a couple of things, aren't there? Like I think the busiest stuff that you don't see is liaising with MPs, lawyers, business experts. We had an administration expert talk to us as well, so we fully understood what we're talking about. Because there was a period where we were like, right, do we try and force administration to try and force Dai Young out? And we had like the explanations, the ramifications and explanations of that coming through. But it's mainly political. Like I'd call it public affairs, and it's almost, to use the American term, it's lobbying, and being like, look, this isn't like, to give you a prime example, it's the Prince Andrew issue, like crisis with him being involved in a Chinese spy was actually very helpful to us because it gave us a news hook to go and speak back and be able to say like, look, we don't think Dai Yong is a Chinese spy, but look at these relations. It's like now everyone's talking about Anglo-Chinese relations. there is someone who has clearly had prominent links to the CCCP. I think that's the correct amount of C's. In charge of a football club, tanking one of the oldest football clubs in the business from the royal county, no less. There's a connection there, and you start using that to start like going after. And within British politics, especially, there are what are known as China hawks, who are basically MPs who are anti-China is a bit too strong, but are very watchful of China and would be like. So your Ian Duncan Smith. To be fair, Nigel Farage is a bit of a China hawk. Like, is always very suspicious of the CCP's influence, and so you start right. There's a lot of to any Star listeners on here, you'll be delighted to know there's a lot of strongly worded letters being written to embassies and whatnot. But you look at someone like Yuan Yang, who has been absolutely superb for us, and also not solely because she's got Chinese heritage, but because she does. She helps us understand it a little bit more, and so when we have fans, and I'm always a little bit enticed by this, is why don't we go and protest outside the Chinese embassy? You have someone like her explain to us, well, look, if you do that, rather than it being impactful, it will get their backs up and it will close conversations rather than open doors. And so little bits of like that going on. And then look, the bottom line is like we don't want to exist. And so if we think that there's to give you a really nice example, there was a period around this time last year where a potential bidder pulled out allegedly because Port Vale was too toxic, and it was like the fan base is too toxic, too virile, and all that. And my response is still at the time, well, look, if they were concerned about a passionate fan base and they don't need a football club, but the last thing we would ever do is put ourselves in a position where we could jeopardize a sale. And our view has always been that when we're in an exclusivity period, we shut up because we're sell before we die, not sell to who we want. Like, and that's another thing we've always been quite passionate about is making sure that we don't have a favourite bidder. Like, we're sell before we die, not sell to whoever we want, kind regards, because beggars can be choosers, etc. Like, it's get him out. So yeah, that's what happens when it's quieter. But to that point, we also I like one of the suggestions I loved from when we did the live session in Blue Collar was, can we also do a bit more positivity with the club and be like, look, this team are flying, we're in the playoffs, we should have more crowds in here. And one of the biggest FUs you can give to Dai Young is fill this stadium full of fans generating money that can only go to the club is one of the biggest middle fingers you can give that nasty man. So there's stuff like that, which we're now working on that as well, which can be like sort of like, right, how can we get more Reading fans into the stadium and make that 18 minutes even louder and go through, but also actually do the club some good, because to your point around Sellers and now Noel Hunt, there's a team that I know I've feel more connected with than for a long time, and they deserve our support.
Yeah, I think from my end, I think the one prime example of stuff that you don't see behind the scenes. I mean, people knew that we were going to have a meeting with the sports minister because it was promised in the House of Commons, but you didn't. No one really knew when it was going to be, apart from the Sell Before We Die group and Star. And we just went along, and a lot of preparation went into that. Actually, we had a full briefing for Steph Peacock, telling her what's going on, and also listing some asks for her and some of our local MPs as well, all of whom attended and were really engaged in the meeting. So I'm really grateful to them for that. So, but that is a prime example of what we've done. That doesn't always that isn't always showcased perhaps before. I think it was even Yuan who revealed that we'd had a meeting and not us first. But yeah, that just shows you that it was we kind of kept it kind of behind closed doors for a little bit, just in case it fell through or something. So yeah, that's the one
I think
one
that's good
example.
though, right? That she would raise that to to point out to her constituents that it's
Yes,
important
definitely.
to her.
She's been fantastic.
Yeah, for
No,
sure.
she's. And I think it's there's a point on that as well where like I look back on some of the like we tried to be as versatile as well like, so for example, the Clown Day protest wasn't my favorite protest, right, because I thought it was a bit silly, but it was the one that got the most kids involved.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're there like, right, well, hang on a minute, it's their football club too. That's something like, look, you're not going to get a load of 7 and 8 year olds go on a walk from blue collar, but you will get some 7 and 8 year olds come through this. And I remember getting a bit of backlash on that because, oh, what's that going to do? It's just like, well, hang on a minute, we can't just like always be militant. Like we've got to do stuff that
Yeah.
brings. You want to appeal to the West Stand as well as Club 1871, right? And then stuff like red cards does that again. Not my favourite thing, but the red card stuff carries real cultural significance, and apparently that's something that genuinely did rile Pang up a little bit. And I'm there like, right, good. I'm glad it has done, and that's one of those things where you've just got to. We've tried to be as inclusive and I think as inclusive as possible in to try and represent the different types of fans to go to football, right? Like,
Yeah.
it still makes me laugh. I've got two guys behind me who love Reading Football Club. They've been sat next to behind me for the best part of 25, 30 years. They won't mention the ownership at all. Like it just doesn't come into their experience of the game, right? They're there to watch football and go through. And I'll speak to them about it, and they'll say, and like the most depth of conversation I'll get out of them is just like, well, why can't we all get together and like buy the club ourselves then? I'm just there like, well, because I don't have a 1 million quid down the side of the sofa, do you? Like it's like, but and that's a really important part of it. It's just like, look, I could do stunts for years that appeal to Club 1871. Like that is more my mindset as a football fan. But you also need to appeal to the fans who are going to bring 3 kids along and it not feel hostile and virile. And I remember like some kids were quite scared at the pitch invasion. I still maintain it was the right thing to do, but that wasn't an all-inclusive protest, right? Where something like Clown Wigs is. And again, that we got some good advice from again a Chinese cultural expert on that who said that they'll hate that because that's more attuned to like Chinese comedy and it's like satiring and like embarrassing and they really won't like that. That would be more offensive. And that actually got us. And can you remember that got us a load of coverage in like China? Like that was in like the South Daily China Post, and that was the first time I started feeling a bit nervous about personal security because there was a picture of me and my dad in the Chinese like paper, and all it said was like Chinese writing, Chinese writing, Chinese writing. Greg Double, Sell Before We Die. And I said like I'm not over the moon about that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it was. But no, it's. I'm not nervous about versatility. Norm, I'm not that nervous about picking it back up again because the bit that Adam hasn't mentioned, which he's being too proud to go through, is he's done a hell of a lot of work on the this must never happen again stuff, which is basically the football governance bill, and
Yeah.
I'm always one step removed from the football governance bill because I just think it's going to come too late for us, and it is too late for us. But I do have a genuine belief that I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen to Swindon. Like I don't want this to happen to other football fans. It sucks,
Yeah.
and it's horrible. And it's like I don't mind. I don't mind admit like look, the reason I Reading Football Club to me is my connection with my dad. And my daughter started coming this season, and it's
Love
magnificent.
it.
And mate, she got to see Lewis Wing ping one in from about 30 yards out, and she was off the chair before me. And it's just like, and honestly, I don't mind admitting being a massive wetter. Like, I almost had a little tear there because I was just like, this is so
No,
sick. I've
that's
got 3
great.
generations of my family, and and when you do get a bit fed up with it all, that's the bit to remember. And I'm quite proud of that in a way, but I'm also, and I think I speak for everyone who's been involved with it, and also, I'm just shattered. Like it's
Yeah.
boring, it's tiring, and you get to the end of it. But as I said, new year, new hope, and I think one of the major obstacles is out of the way. And the one thing I think you'll touch on this in a bit, but the one thing we feel we can be really influential on is the club's communication with the fans,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's a coincidence that whenever we pipe up, we get something out of the club.
Hmm.
Um, because and it's so difficult that because I've drawn a link between the club's lack of communication and fans not wanting to go and watch us. Because
Yeah.
in my opinion, our attendance should be higher than it is, given where we are in the league and how we're playing. And our home form is ludicrous.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
It's
if
insane.
you turn up to the Medeski, unless there's a crowd of over 18,000, you're going to see a Reading win. It's just sod's law that whenever we have a bumper crowd, we play like utter donkeys
Yeah.
and erased a dream for thousands of under sevens. But I do think that's something that I feel strongly about with Sell Before We Die, but also with Start. Like, we've got to keep on the club's case, because there is a real correlation between your lack of respect for the fans and people's willingness to buy tickets. And I think that, look, we know it's difficult, so talk to us. Like,
Well, so going on that, then I'll jump into that question kind of, and Adam, I'll let you go first on this one. But we got obviously the statements from the club in the back half of the year. They're coming out sort of monthly at the moment. I think that the last one was like just in at the last moment
Yeah.
to be monthly, sort of handed in last minute. But how have you felt about the statements so far? And then Greg, I'll come to you on that afterwards.
You know what? I feel like some of them have been pretty bland, but I thought the last one was pretty good. I didn't really understand the people saying, "Oh, well, that tells us nothing." Then it literally did tell us something about the High Tongue stop notice, and it had a little bit more detail than other ones did. So I wouldn't say I'm impressed. I don't think I'm ever impressed, but I would say that I was fairly content with the last statement. What we need now is proper progress on a sale. We have God knows how many players out of contract at the end of the season, which is scary, to be honest with you, because if we get to the end of the season without a sale, we could be done. But I mean, I think Greg may be a little bit more optimistic on this than me, but that's the one thing that I fear, and we need proper progress now. But in terms of what the club comms team are doing, or whoever's writing it, I think they've done a pretty decent job on that. And obviously, their job isn't really to facilitate a sale. So I've got to separate the two.
Yeah, no, I hard agree. For me, I think that the two main thing, or three main things, I suppose, for me from that statement is, one, it felt like it was written by a human being, which I think, if you've seen previous statements, I think some bright spark ran previous statements through ChatGPT, and the likelihood of it being generated by ChatGPT was about 90%. And I think on this one, it was just like, you could just tell, like, someone who gives a shit about the club had written it. And it felt like there was some thanks to the fans. It had a bit of emotion. It did have some detail. It was like, it was one of my favourite things. This tells us nothing. It tells us one of the biggest blockers to the club being sold is now not happening. It also tells us that we're trying to get funding off the new buyer
Yeah.
to short-term fund the club. It's just like, they're two massive jumps. Like, it was positive in that respect. The bit that makes me nervous is still is, as Adam said, it's just progress on the sale now, because if money comes in from a potential buyer, all that really means is we're back to wherever it was that Coig started doing that.
Right.
So it's thing. My my reasons for optimism are quite simple. It's like the removal of that high tongue issue means that the club is eminently more sellable. Essentially, it was unsellable while that issue existed, so it's now sellable again. Like, all of our experts we speak to have sort of confirmed that. Like, I don't know if for those of you who are conspicuously online, like Mike Gow, who is like our go-to expert for that, basically confirmed that. If they're like, right, if that's the case, this club is free to be sold. Excellent, we're in a great bit. The bit that's now is it's like that issue with High Tongue was found really late in Rob
Yeah.
Courage bit. So if you're a pessimist, which I can completely understand why you would be after 18 months of not being sold, you go, right, that's one skeleton. Is there another? Is there another 20 skeletons in the closet which you can't see because China is a closed economy, and it it seems that Reading Football Club is a small problem in Dai Yong's financial woes.
Yeah.
Could there be another problem to stop it? But I'm conscious that lots of lawyers and money men, and the one big positive that we were sort of told, I think it was October last year, is that the good news about Coig getting so close but not so far is that he's essentially given a blueprint for how the club can be sold. The data room is all together. It's all packaged up nicely for someone who wants it to come in. But yeah, that the most important part of that statement, other than the high tongue bit, was we are now looking to secure short term funding for the club. And some people read that as, oh shit, are we about to sell a load of players? It's not. It was, we are now asking the potential buyer to fund the club.
Yeah.
Which I understand is not a million miles away from happening, and that basically puts us back to what, March of last year. We now have a potential buyer short term funding the club while trying to buy the club.
Well, you helped me segue that. Actually, like a seasoned podcast host there, Greg, kind of talking about the funding and obviously short term. It's January, the worst time of year for Reading fans, when we might lose players. In the middle of the season, it has been 4.5 years now, Reading fans, since Reading have spent money.
Is it that long?
It's been 4.5. Yeah, summer 2020, I believe, was the last time. So I think that was Ovia Jaria as well. So yeah, it went well the last time we did it.
What's the policy? What's the policy on swearing on the pod?
You can do it. Don't worry. That's just for Ryan to take care of afterwards. So sorry, Ryan.
Nice.
But let's talk about the January transfer window. So do we think the club will need to sell players for cash flow purposes? I think that my buddy Tyler Binden's off for quality purposes, but do we think other players will be sold for cash flow?
I mean, you can look at it one or two ways with Tyler Binden. You could look at it and say he's only got 6 months left on his contract, and Reading probably should be selling a player of his caliber whilst they still can. So you can you can kind of understand it if they sell it. Not that I want to make any excuses for Dayong Pang, but this is a type of player that we probably should be cashing in on and potentially getting back on loan for the remainder of the season. But then you look at it in a different way from Binden's point of view. He could have loads of offers on the table at the end of the season, and you've got his potential agent wanting a bigger fee. Maybe he might be able to get a better deal for himself even, and obviously the player Binden might have more offers on the table because he'll be a free agent. So you can look at it one or two ways of him. I wouldn't be surprised to see one or two sales because you've got a potential bidder that probably still needs to go through the OADT, and there's no guarantee even after that, even if he passes, as we saw with Kuig, that he's going to be able to get a deal over the line. So I'm not sure how much funding a potential bidder would put in. So I do think maybe one or two sales might happen. You hope not, because we have far less depth than we do kind of now than we did last January, where we could probably afford to offload one or two. But this window, it's a bit concerning, the possibility of players being sold, because we've got so many academy kids involved that we don't want to be offloading any of our senior pros.
Yeah, I almost feel like the depth, in inverted commas, this year is the distance between us and relegation, because the team have done so well. We at least have some leeway, if the performances tail off because we lose players. Greg, what do you think?
Very similar to Adam, which is not what you want to hear. But no, I think it depends on if this funding is landed. Like, I can only speak for myself and be like, right, if I'm a multi-millionaire with good funding, and I'm going to be saying like, look, I'm probably with you on Binden, like 6-month contract signed on a free. Believe it or not, that might the bit that winds me up about Tyler Binden is just like, there was in a normal club, in a normal functioning world, he would have been offered a contract at the end of last season when he hadn't set the world on light, but he'd obviously established himself as like the centre back partner with Mbenge, and you would have given him like a 2-3 year contract just to make sure we got a good fee for him. And then this year he's been playing like fucking Franz Bindenbauer, and you're like, right, hang on a minute, we should have been getting like a couple of mil for him, and we're not going to get anything like that because he's got 6 months to go. I actually subscribe to the view that I think he'll stay in this transfer window, so you can quote me on that, and he'll go for a free at the end because it'll be better for agents. I think Sim is doing a written piece on the players you'd least like to lose, and who'd be the most devastating. I broadly agree with that. I think Lewis Wing, I think leaving would be an absolute tragedy for loads of reasons. Like, one, I think he's completely irreplaceable. I think in terms of this team, I think his experience, he's quite comfortably he's the most experienced outfield player other than Harley Dean, say.
Yeah.
So, and that matters in such a young team. But he's also 29 years old and got a couple of years left on his contract. The only team that I thought would have come in for him would have been Hull. And so they're either going to have to pay over the odds or respect it's not going to happen. Nibs would be a tragedy because he's basically the solution to every versatile problem. And I think Sam Smith would be a problem because I don't think we've got anyone who can replace him to the same caliber. I think that would represent the biggest drop-off. So they would be my must-keeps. I think there's a world that Michael Craig could go. Like, if you allow me to be briefly flirtatious and speculative. I don't like this injury he's got that Noel Hunt's basically said isn't a real injury, and feels a bit badly timed when he's been linked with people. But ultimately, like I again, if we're talking about it as the off the pitch episode, I would be like, well, if I'm a new owner looking to fund, I'd quite like to keep this team together for the best part. And
Yeah.
if I can whoopsie buy a championship club instead of whoopsie buy a League One club, you would like to think that if Coig could influence Femi Aziz being sold and Chem Campbell coming in, you would like to say that another potential bidder who is funding the club could say, no, you're not going to sell him, and no, you're not going to sell him. So that's
Right.
my reasons for being slightly positive.
That's actually a good point then. So I guess follow up and listeners, this is we're speculating. Obviously, we're Reading fans and we all follow the team very closely, but obviously we don't have in the know information necessarily. Wim's not here with the journalists, so but do you think we'll keep Chem Campbell's services? I suppose because I think in terms of important players, he's kind of nailed down that spot on the right wing now.
I think. I think I think we might. I think look, we've been very clear that we want him to stay. I think it all depends on if keeping him makes any change to the business plan we've got agreed with the EFL. So basically, if Wolves are happy to continue to pay for him, essentially, then yes, I think we'll keep him as long as it's still it's literally just the time gets added onto his contract and none of the financials change for us. Then happy days. I suspect they might try and negotiate a clause which will be if a takeover happens, you've got to buy him. Which again is not unheard of. That's something that can happen in the event of money coming in, it goes in. We had something similar with Puskas going the other way. So yeah, I think as long as it's like you just got to think about it in terms of as long as there is no way this increases expenditure for the club, then yes, and there is a way that could happen, which is basically Wolves. Thank you very much. Big fan of Wolves, always have been. Love going to Molineux and having coins rain on my head. This can be your payback.
Yeah,
Right.
I think we might keep him. I think we might have to beg the EFL a bit, maybe potentially, but hopefully we'll be able to keep him. I mean, he didn't start off brilliantly, but he was my kind of nominee for the award show for the most improved because he started off and was a little bit slow, and then I think against Leyton Orient, he even had a one-on-one chance that he spurned, but he's done well ever since. Even in open play now, he's looking more dangerous, looking more threatening, looking very effective, and I know that it was only against Harbour and Newport, but he showed that he was a class above in those games. He made a real difference in both of those matches. So, I'm keen for us to keep him, and hopefully we do.
Yeah, definitely keen to keep Chem as well. So kind of getting towards the end of my list of questions here, but we're in a new year. Are there plans for protests in 2025? And if so, how do fans get involved? What do you want out of the fan base, I guess, as an organization in 2025?
I think like look, I think the first thing we do is it's quite. This sounds loftier than it's meant to, but we basically we're run by the fans, and it's like the point. The point is we don't do anything that we think is out of kilter with the fans' opinions of it. Like to give you a nice example, like last season when I have a bit of an issue when the football club is going well, like on the pitch, and Sell Before We Die brings some misery to it because I'm still like a bit like, look, we're still football fans. We still want to have some fun.
Yeah.
Like we've got to be able to enjoy like spanking a few teams without being like, oh, by the way, we're still owned by that prick. It's just a bit. I don't like it when we're like that. And so it's got to be with the fans' consent. My view is, say if we have a massive fire sale in January, fans will say we need to do something,
Sure.
and then we'll go to the fans and say what do you think it is we need to do, and then we'll probably do it. The only thing that I'm like vehemently opposed to now is pitch invasions because this is my personal view, and if I got outvoted. Just knock my phone over one sec.
Yeah,
If I went to portrait landscape, if I got outvoted, I'd respect it. But I don't want. I think losing points for Reading Football Club is Di Young's responsibility, not us. And I'd hate it if it was.
Put.
I'd hate it if it was 18 points to him and 4 to us. It would suck. I couldn't deal with that, and that's when we have. It's always when we have chats about administration. I can't get out. There's a big chunk of me that thinks it's probably the right thing to pursue at one point. I still can't get out of my head that I'm a Reading football fan and I don't want us to lose 12 points.
Yeah.
And that's rather than thinking about all the off the pitch thing, I just think, 12 points off this team would be that would just suck, wouldn't it? Like, and it's just like, so you try and split it up. But yeah, the bottom line is, I hope we don't need to have a protest because we're about to get sold and
Yeah.
everything's rosy and flying and we've kept players and thanks to Ruben Sellers' compensation, we've paid HMRC and go through. But it's simple. We'll flex, and if the fans say we want a protest, we'll take a lead organising it. But we want to open it up to more volunteers to help, and like the march was a fantastic example of that. That's when we had whatever members of Sell Before We Die had. It grew by about 30, 40 people that weekend because everyone volunteered to go in, and that's what it is. It's like the only time I get really annoyed on Sell Before We Die stuff is this idea that it's like a closed off club. It's really not. It's like members go up and down depending on what we need and when it happens. Like I remember when we were doing the Bearwood training ground stuff, all of a sudden we had a load of property lawyers in the group because it's like we needed that level of expertise.
Yeah.
And I was just remember to be like, I don't have a clue what's going on here, but I really like it. And it was just, that's what we do. So whenever we need expertise, we'll reach out, but we also just need tell us what you want us to do. It's like we are Reading fans that trying to save our football club, and that can be any of us.
Yeah, I think we had some suggestions, as Greg said, at the in-person forum, which was good. You know, making a positive case for the club. I think that's probably more of a star thing than the Sell Before We Die thing, but I still think that's a good suggestion. That's obviously something that we can do. I think with a lot of fan action, I think we're coming to the end of the road with it in terms of what we as a group can organise. I think organising a pitch invasion, a mid-match pitch invasion would be stupid because then everyone would know. That's the bottom line. Even if we wanted to do it, it would just be stupid for us to promote it because then that would allow for better preparation. And of course, it would have to be, I think, up to the general fan base. For it. I don't think we can advocate for something like that again without fans just doing it organically. I think a lot of stuff now needs to be fan led. I mean, case in point, we tried doing the London protest in February. I don't know how many people remember this, but you know, we organised a list of protests that we wanted to do. So we had the Charlton one, we had the Port Vale one, and then we had a London one at the end of February last year. And the Met were very accommodating. I can't fault them one bit. They were very informative, but because of the location and because the Buckingham Gate was, which is Dayong's house, is next to Buckingham Palace, we wouldn't have been able to have the protest that we would have wanted in terms of making it, you know, quite noisy and lively. It would have been more of like a funeral type vibe, and I just don't think that would have quenched the thirst of fans who would have wanted to make a little bit of noise.
Strategic that from Dai to
yeah
house
yeah
yeah.
So in terms of pitch invasion and stuff like that, we can't kind of advocate for it. We may as well be straight up with that now. Otherwise, we're going to create some confusion on that. It would have to be a decision by the fan base, and you know, obviously, right now, I don't think it'd be a good idea. Even like organising buses to house it, it would require, you know, a plod presence and stuff like that. And I just, you know, as a group, it would just be really, really difficult for us to do that sort of stuff rather than people going like rogue on different things. So I think for us, we're going to be limited in terms of what we can really do. I think, you know, in terms of a lot of the fan action, we've done that. We've been there with a lot of things and done it. You know, we'll continue with the political stuff. We'll continue trying to get coverage. You know, get our situation kind of in the media. I think that remains really important. But you know, and there's obviously been some volunteers as well who will try and get into a kind of volunteer group. But apart from that, obviously it's up to the fans kind of what we do. We'll continue working, especially on the political angle. But you know, there obviously comes a barrier for a lot of people in the group as well. I think, you know, I kind of reached my barrier at the end of 2024 because I've been a social media admin for like all of it basically for 18 months now. So I think, you know, there's different levels. You know, some people do more at one point and people do less at another point. I think, I did quite a bit last month, so I'm kind of taking a break this month and that type of thing. So, you'll see kind of fluctuating levels of activity, but we'll always try and work behind the scenes, even if we're not too active on social media. And I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
No, my main area of priority is I think there's a couple there's a couple of things that I'm actively trying to work on, which is I think it's also important to sort of talk about Star and Sell Before We Die. Sell Before We Die allows us to be bad cop, and Star is good cop, and Star is like,
It's a
look,
good way of putting it.
yeah, it's and Star is like, look, it was Star that fixed, or hopefully have helped fix the smell that was coming out of Club 1871, which I don't know if you've heard about that, but
Oh, this is new
I've
to me. No.
no, I've christened it the Dai Pong,
Okay.
which is it's the upgrade. It's the new Whitley Whiff, but it turns out there was a giant fatberg underneath the stadium that was basically causing, or in the drains rather, I should say,
Oh,
that was
it was
causing it to smell up.
disgusting.
And
It was absolutely
yeah, and
disgusting, to be honest with you. I mean, I smelt it and I looked across to other people with suspicious looks, but it turns out it wasn't any of their fault. So if anyone
mm,
saw me looking across at them, I do apologise, but they probably recognise me now.
but to give you an example of how the relationship is, like for me, for Sell Before We Die, that was like, for me, that was like, oh, we could campaign on this. Like it's so bad that the stadium now smells of shit poo. And as it turns out, it was actually no. That's one that Star can take, and we can actually fix the stadium and like do our bit for it. And I think that's something that Star have done very well, especially with the EFL in terms of getting our staff some mental health support and stuff like that. Whereas Sell Before We Die has been a lot more like it's a little more than the hammer than the cuddle sort of thing.
yeah.
But I think something that I'm very interested in is we do well when we make it bigger than Reading. Because when it's a Reading issue, it's a Reading issue. When it's and this is even going back to, if some of your older listeners will remember, that the reason I felt that the Thames Valley Royals protest was so clever or smart or convenient was because it was Oxford and Reading, two enemies uniting against a common thing. And I like the idea of trying to do more with other football clubs to highlight this isn't just a Reading problem, this is a Reading and Swindon problem, Reading
Yeah.
Morecambe problem, a Reading and Everton problem. Like, there is bad ownership everywhere in football, and actually when we get together and Reading and football fans being united, like, goes really nicely. The other bit I'm really interested in is I think the FA have got away with murder on some of this stuff, and as the ultimate guardians of the game, if anyone did want to have a protest, it's the FA who've given us some of the harshest punishments. Like, it was, I think they gave us the harshest punishment for, who was it who knocked us out of the club? Ebbsfleet? Ebbsfleet? Have I got that right?
Eastleigh, is it Eastleigh?
Eastleigh.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Jeez, I forgot about that. Oh, there you go. There's another protest. It was superb. Actually, Ross, while I've got you, that was something that got a bee in my bonnet. I remember because it was Ian Wright. Who was the commentator that day,
Sam
Adam?
Matterface.
Sam Matterface, and
Oh,
everyone was
yeah.
like, "Oh my god, Sam Matterface is so well researched. He's done this." So of course we gave him a bloody dossier. I remember that's the only time I've been like, "Guys, can we please have a little bit of thanks
Yeah.
for that?" Like, I remember everyone being like, "I can't believe how much Sam Matterface knows about Reddit." It's like Adam wrote him a 100-page dossier. That's the only time I've been a little bit like, "Actually, no, I do want some
You know
attention for
what?
that." Like we
Yeah, I think so. We briefed him up to his eyeballs. We gave him a little DM on Twitter. And he was to his credit, he was doing some research anyway, and he read things out beautifully, and he really did care about the situation. He didn't have to, speak about our situation in the way that he did. So all credit to him. But yeah,
That's fair, yeah. Because often when you get like the non-league FA Cup game, they want to talk about how the dinner ladies are playing up front and stuff like that. So
Yeah, exactly, and it's
yeah,
not, and it's, I think, to that wider point about football, like, you're seeing it happen now more and more. It's like
yeah, yeah,
fans are pissed off, and it's not just about ownership. And like, I would like us to join forces with a couple more of the Premier League sides who are like Fulham getting absolutely mullered on their season ticket prices. Like, everyone, what's the latest one with United? Basically, like, I think Spurs being annoyed at their ownership does annoy me a little bit when I'm like, oh, are you too well run? But
yeah,
the issue of fans getting mugged off for football essentially becoming tourism is something that is a wider malaise of football fan culture, right? And I think we can do more to join up on that. But look, my genuine message is I hope we don't need any more protests, because we just need the action now. And I think the one thing I think we can definitely still do as an angry Sell Before We Die is make sure the clubs talk to us properly and keep them honest on those updates. And
yeah.
I spoke to someone at the club who was quite taken aback at how positive the reaction had been to the previous statement. And I was just like, well, yeah, because like people like being spoken to and treated with a bit of respect, and like it was just like being, rather than being industrial gaslit by the football club that you support, it's just like, yeah, like maybe you should do more of that.
No,
And it's
yeah,
like,
you're
and look,
right.
there
Respect
will,
breeds respect both ways,
yeah,
right?
in it, do you know what I mean? And it's just like there's a couple of times when there might be the odd update which is a nothing update. I'd like, and look, there'll be some times where football fans will be impatient. I've done it again. Will be impatient, but I'd much rather have an update that didn't say much than silence. Because when you get silence, is when you get the nutty conspiracy theories
Mm.
of like, well, he just wants the club to die, and I just can't see the rationale for that. But those conspiracy grows in silence, and when you leave silence, you leave a giant vacuum for people to say he doesn't want to sell the club. He's never going to get sold. And you get people like Daniel Lloyd coming out and saying like, there's some grander conspiracy. You notice he goes quiet whenever there's a period of quietness, and then pipes up when something else happens. It's just like
It is
it's
better, yeah, to have the club actually
just
communicate rather than let anyone
communicate it, and
get
it's like,
through.
and it makes people feel connected with their football club again.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the saddest things. Like you say, 4.5 years of not being. It's been about that since I felt like that real. I've always said that Reading Football Club is at its best when it feels like Reading Football Club is in the town centre as well. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
remember, yeah, it's like Ross. I've forgotten how much time you spend it, but back when we were a Premier League, I remember being like it being a good sign that there was a Reading store in the Oracle,
Yep.
and it
Yep.
being like Reading is everywhere. I live just around the corner from Stamford Bridge, and one thing they do very well when it's match day, it feels like the whole of Fulham Broadway is Chelsea's gaff,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
feels good, and that feels like, and I think Reading is superb at that. And it's the one thing from Roger Smee's bid that I thought, without knowing anything else about it, felt objectively sexy, was that the University of Reading were willing to give it a backing. There was like, I think there was Reading Borough Council like, we are better when the club and the town are hand in hand. And I don't think we've had that for ages. And then when we do it well, like there's so much talent. Sorry, I'm ranting now, but it's because I really believe there is so much talent in that football club.
Mm.
You got stuff like the first Noel was a fantastic campaign, and you were there like super. Of course, we were going to lose and like play horribly the moment it kicked off, but it was like good club. Like the club puts out good content when it's got like more than a tenner to spend,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's just like I just want rid of the tumour that is our ownership, so the rest of the club can thrive. Because there is so much good in this club.
Definitely.
And yeah, as I said, it's where I always get a bit emotional on it. Where I'm just like, there's so much potential here, and that's why I always end up slightly more optimistic than the average. Because I'm just saying, like, why wouldn't you buy this club? The only reason you're not going to buy this club is because it's so difficult to buy because of the various economic gymnastics that have happened.
Yeah.
But I'm astonished at the current bidder. I feel positive about, because he's got the small issue of a court case as well from Rob Coig, which we haven't even mentioned yet, but that's floating around somewhere. It's clearly a hard football club to buy anyway, but he's still knocking about,
Yeah.
which I take as a universal positive, and that's and for as long as buyers still keep turning up, I will still have that glimmer of positivity. It's when the buyers dry up is when I'll hit peak negativity, which I wasn't a million miles away from
Yeah.
until fairly recently.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, Adam, any I think we'll wrap up shortly, but any last thoughts on the situation? And you're right, we didn't mention Rob Coig's lawsuit, but there's too much off the pitch. We'll leave that for
Yeah.
another
Yeah,
day.
yeah. I think it's healthy that we have slightly differing views. I mean, on different owners and stuff like that. And from my point of view, I know that I should probably know better considering that De Jong passed the EFL test. But I think at this stage, I'm just batting for anyone who will buy us because we're in a
Sure.
absolutely dire situation at the moment. I think what I would say is that at Star we've got some. Greg actually mentioned ticket prices. We've had three amendments put forward from a lord on the football governance bill. One's on ticket prices, and I can't quite remember the other one. I think one's like a whistleblower route through to the independent football regulator, and there's one on top of that as well. So we've got stuff going on at Star in terms of football governance, and we'll continue to work with other trusts and other organisations as well. And yeah, we'll just continue the work. I mean, even I have to give credit to some other people in staff for making the Rules Remember Day happen as well. That was fantastic, and it shows you the very best of Reading Football Club. But yeah, we'll continue. I mean, in terms of Sell Before We Die, I think we'll just continue to assess all options. I don't think we're kind of taking anything really off the table at the moment. We're exploring all options to try and push for a sale, and if we can do that, to be honest, I just think that's the best we can do at the moment. We explore all options, but yeah, we've got obviously a call coming up with Yuan Yang. If that still goes ahead, I think it probably should. But yeah, we've got that going on.
Well, keep pushing, guys. Obviously, we appreciate everything you're doing, everything Sell Before We Die are doing, and Star as well. Where can people find you online if they want to read your thoughts, your opinions, all that kind of good stuff? Adam?
My handle on X is still at ajonesrfc. I haven't used it as much because I've actually been the sole admin. Well, one of the two probably admins now on the Sell Before We Die account. So that's been my home really on X for the past year or so. It's great actually because I can post stuff behind Sell Before We Die that I probably couldn't on Star or whatever. So it's nice to be a bit naughty on the Sell Before We Die account, including that bingo card on what kind of terminology we're going to get in the statement, which I was actually proved wrong on, to be fair. So yeah, I'm at ajonesrfc. I'm on Bluesky as well. Just to open up my options.
Yeah, come on over.
And yeah, you can find me there.
Awesome, Greg. Where can people find you?
Oh God, you don't want to find me. Just go to Sell Before We Die. Like, otherwise, I've got the embarrassing handle of Dubstep 1988.
Oh yes, sure, Dubstep. Yep.
But
okay.
Dubstep was a nickname before the genre of music because my surname's double and I can move on the dance floor. But
brilliant.
I got overtaken by Benga and alike. But yeah, it's like. Yeah, you'll see me mainly rambling on Twitter. I can't quite bring myself to go onto Bluesky just yet, but
you'll be there eventually. Don't worry.
Yeah.
It's the one-man Reading FC community being grown by me over there.
I must admit, so I downloaded it thinking like, oh, Twitter has got so toxic now. I'm going to move over to Bluesky, but then Bluesky was like so soppy. I was just like, oh, I really am the committed.
Yeah.
I am the committed political. I am the committed political centrist. Where I'm like, oh, Twitter's too toxic, and then it was like Bluesky is too woke. Like I was just there, like, oh my God, like this is outrageous. It's almost too lovely on Bluesky.
Yeah.
I was just like, what?
The Elon Musk stuff.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just come and be soppy with me, Reading fans.
Yeah, I think
I'm having a lovely time.
The Elon Musk stuff. I think it just got too much for me. I think earlier this week, and I just downloaded Bluesky just to open up my options. I don't know if it what was it John Fury said you ought to be ashamed of yourself, you political something or other. That's how I felt. But yeah.
Wonderful.
That's why I've opened up my options.
Yeah, nice. Well, that's the important thing. Yeah, opening up our options.
Yeah.
But would you accept an Elon Musk Reading takeover? That's the big question. If he doesn't do Liverpool,
I think I would accept one from Stalin at this point. To be honest, as long as we've got some funding.
All right. Let's leave it there before we really start finding some interesting characters to sell the club to. Adam, Greg, thank you so much for coming on today. This has been a really fun chat. Thank you guys. I think the listeners are going to really enjoy it. Thank you to ZCZ Films as always for sponsoring the pod. I don't know if Ben will be back next week, but whatever, we'll work it out.
Part-time.
Maybe he's back. Get well soon, I think.
A podcaster with no voice is not the one, is it?
Seriously. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Hope the club is sold in 2025. This is the year, hopefully. So keep your fingers crossed for that, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Tilehurst End podcast, and come on, you Royals.